In this town, there's no off-season. The news never stops, and neither do we. It's always game day in Cleveland with Andy Baskin and Daryl Ryder.
Welcome to It's Always Game Day in Cleveland. I'm Daryl Ryder. Andy Baskin has the day off. We are brought to you by Smiley One in Bryant, Northeast Ohio's premier heating and cooling solution. The Browns offseason about to kick into overdrive. NFL Combine, it is in the rearview mirror. Free agency, a week away, but a big story we've been following on the podcast. And of course, 92.3 The Fan, the Browns' proposal to move to Brook Park. They want to build a $2.4 billion dome along with a $1 billion mixed-use development right across from Cleveland Hopkins International Airport. The issue is how to pay for it, and it's something that is being negotiated by the owners of the Browns, the Haslam Sports Group, along with local and state officials. The Browns, though, are not the only team that has needs. Stadium construction costs are skyrocketing, and today's special guest has a unique proposal to help the state of Ohio be able to contribute to these massively expensive projects, and that proposal is being combed through right now down in Columbus as state lawmakers work on the state's fiscal budget for 2026 and 2027. It's an honor to welcome in Ohio Governor Mike DeWine to our little old podcast. Governor DeWine, thank you so much for making time for we slappies up here in Cleveland.
Well, good to be with you. Thank you very much. We're just talking off the air a minute ago. I'm admiring all your paraphernalia back there, all the bobbleheads, and I see a basketball and who knows what else back there. All good.
It is a cornucopia of Cleveland sports history, as I like to call it. Let's jump right into this. You have come up with a very unique proposal. To double the state gaming tax, currently at 20%. It would, if I understand correctly and read the documentation correctly, would go up to 40%. That extra 20% of revenue would go into a fund to be used to be divided around the state for various stadium projects statewide. Just if you could touch on the genesis of that proposal and why you think that's going to work.
Yeah, so for 50 years at least that I can think back, the state of Ohio has participated to some extent in either the construction of stadiums, ballparks, or in renovations. The latest one, I think, was $30 million for the Guardians. That was a much, much bigger project. Renovation, but we put 30 million in. And look, here's the problem. We're getting more teams, which is good. We're going to see more women's sports, which I think is a great thing. We got women's basketball, professional basketball coming. I think we're going to see soccer, and we hope both in Cincinnati and Cleveland. So a lot of things are happening. It's expanding. And it's going to become tougher and tougher, frankly, to take money out of the general fund. So when we take it out of the general fund, as we've done in the past, what this has done, it competes against education. It competes against mental health. And frankly, it's just going to get tougher and tougher and tougher to do this. I think that sports in Ohio is one of the great things that we have. I classify it with museums and art and all kinds of theater that we have. This is another way that we have fun and enjoy ourselves and makes Ohio special. So I don't have a problem with putting money in, but we're going to be really, really limited in the future. So I came up with this idea that we would double the sports gaming tax. And let me just say first, for those of you who gamble, you will not notice the difference. The sports gaming companies are out there crying, but the truth is that 97% of sports gaming is done online. We're not after, the brick and mortar. At least they employ people. But these folks, most of them are almost all of them except one, I think, are out of state. And that money is just going outside the state of Ohio. So by doubling the tax, we would take what's the additional 20%. We would keep the first 20% that goes to education, things like that. The second 20%, though, the new money, we would set up a fund, and that fund would be used for two purposes. One would be to assist and help in regard to sports facilities in the state, professional sports facilities. That would not only include major league, but it would include minor league. For example, minor league baseball, very big in the state of Ohio, really something important. But they have needs as well, and so that money would be available for that. The other part of the money could be used for what we call sports youth sports. One of the problems we have seen is that in some of our schools, they have to charge, or they do charge kids to play sports. That's just a problem, I think. If we have kids who can't play sports, as my friend Jim Tressel, our new lieutenant governor, said, we want kids involved in team sports. That there's something very, very important about this, and not excluding these kids from being able to play. So if we did this, now it's up to the legislature. I've made the proposal, but if the legislature did it, this would generate an extra 150, we think, at a minimum, million a year. And so that's per year, and that would just go on. And we think it could be very easily up to 180 or 190 million a year. So it's a lot of money, and this is a way, frankly, for us to be able to help our professional sports teams, but really help the fans have a better place. At the same time, not compete against education, not compete against the other things that we have to do and should be doing and want to do in the state. So that's kind of how it is quickly anyway.
I want to go back to something you mentioned about just how the tax gets applied. Just to clarify, what is actually being taxed right now? Is it the wagers? Yeah. Is it the winnings? If I were to place a bet and I win my bet, am I paying 40% of that bet in tax?
Yeah, good question. It's taxed directly against the company. It's based on the volume that is done, based upon. It's interesting. Last year, I think if you looked at it, it was about $500 million. If I have this right, about $500 million that Ohio citizens lost as they were. That's the net loss as they were gaming in the state of Ohio. So it's a lot of money, but the companies pay it. And this would not make us the highest. New York State has 51%. Other states, there are a few other states that have 51%. It certainly would not make us the smallest or the lowest, but we would not be the highest. I think for the average person, they're not going to see any difference at all. They're going to game however they want to game. And these companies, while they will obviously they don't want to pay it, I understand that, I get that, but they're not leaving Ohio. There's 2 or 3 of them, as you know, that can totally dominate, and they're going to stay in Ohio because this is a lucrative area, and they're going to continue to run their games in the state of Ohio. They're not leaving.
One of the unique portions of the proposal that caught my eye was the mixed use development section of it, in which similar. I believe it's up to 40% teams of their project costs they could apply for when it comes to a stadium project, but that same number would apply to a mixed use development component, either in or around their stadium or even their training facility. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and again, I have a couple of cautions though. This language is our proposal. The legislature, will do with it whatever they want to do. Second thing I would point out is that while we focus a lot, and I understand, focusing on maybe the Browns, but this is going to help Akron. This is going to help the minor leagues. It's going to help if we get new stadiums in here for new sports or new women's sports. It conceivably can help. It will help those. So this is going to help a lot of different areas. It's going to be virtually every area of the state of Ohio. It will be able to be helped in this, as well as, some of this money will go for youth sports. So that will include all parts of the state of Ohio. The big ones, we always look at the big ones. We look at the new stadiums being built. But the truth is, all of these have needs that every so many years occur. And I'm astounded, frankly, what it takes for particularly a big stadium that's been there for 20 years or 15 years, and what it costs just to bring it back up to where it should be. These are big facilities, and it takes a lot of money, and it's a real challenge.
How much work goes into trying to get this proposal that you came up with, as you've constructed it, through the legislature and onto your desk so you can sign it as a budget?
Yeah. So look, I think there's a couple things. Members of the General Assembly, understand. I think are beginning to really understand that this money could be very, very beneficial to their community, not just to a community a ways, but whether you live in Dayton, whether you live in Akron, whether you live in Toledo, Youngstown, Mahoning Valley area, we got teams all over the state of Ohio. So I think that realization is starting to sink into them. Second thing, I think it's starting to sink into them that this is really new money. It's not going to compete. They won't have to compete anymore. And frankly, have people say very understandably, look, I support my team, but that money would be better going to our schools. So I think they like that. I think where the legislature always has trouble is when you call something a tax. I guess it is a tax, but I prefer to call it a fee. It's the fee we're charging, frankly, this company to come into the state of Ohio and be able to do this. And it is in fact based on how much business they do. So I think they're having trouble with that. But what the sports gaming companies are doing, they're contacting their fans. They're doing some advertising, and they're basically saying, you won't get as good of deals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the reality is, what we see in other states, that's just not true. I mean, you're going to continue to gamble, and you're not going to see, if you want to gamble and you want to do this, and you're going to do it online, and it's not going to really make any difference to the average fan or the average person who is betting. It will make a difference to the company, and there's no doubt about it. It will cost them some money, but again, there's kind of poetic justice if you think about it. These companies are making a lot of money. They don't have to maintain the facilities. If you didn't have the facilities, they couldn't be offering bets on sports. I mean, this is part of the cost of sports today. And it's a lot of money. It's a significant amount of money. And it seems to me that the folks who are making a lot of money off this, the sports gaming companies ought to pay something to help us have these stadiums so that we can have these games that people then can bet on and these companies can make money on.
Off the top, you mentioned the contribution the state made toward the progressive field renovation for the Cleveland Guardians, which is currently getting close to wrapping up here. Could that money that's already been allocated, could that retroactively maybe folded into this new fund should this go forward?
I don't think so. I mean, I think this would be prospective, but if you look at it and you talk to the whoever owns these local stadiums, and keep in mind that a lot of these stadiums, as you know, are owned by the county or owned by the city, and in the long run, we changed it. The ruling that we've had, or the law that we've had so far, allows, and it's usually bonded money, up to 15% of the total cost the state could put in. We would change that in two ways. We would take that to 40%, but we would anticipate in most cases, maybe not all, but in most cases, if you've got a minor league team, for example, that you wouldn't have to bond that. If you bond something, you're paying for it. It's like your house. You're paying a lot of money extra in interest. So we rather be able to take that money that year and put it, say, all right, this is what the state is going to do towards your program. You know what that is if you're the city or county or the team, whoever owns it. But that will simply be cash that goes into the project, and we would be done with that particular project. We would not be in a situation where we have to go out and float bonds. Bonds are floated and go through all that, and then the cost goes up rather dramatically when you have to do the bonding.
Right. Up here in Cuyahoga County, obviously there's a lot of debate over whether the Browns renovate the existing stadium, whether they pursue this project in Brook Park. As you're aware, the Browns prefer the Brook Park option over the lakefront for a variety of reasons. I promise I'm not going to ask you to pick favorites here, but the local discourse and the debate, how much does that factor into what happens in Columbus as you guys try and do some of the heavy lifting? I think originally the Browns asked for around $600 million for the new dome. Just what type of challenges does that present when there's legal action, the Modell laws being invoked by Cleveland, and there's that kind of conflict?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, if you talk about $600 million, we haven't had anything like that ever as far as that kind of amount of money. And so that's out of the general fund. That's one of the reasons I think people, have a hard time with that. That's a huge amount of money. So, could that money come out of this fund? It could, but I think that people need to remember a couple things. One is it's not just for this project, whatever happens. It is ultimately going to benefit every professional sports team, major league, minor league in the state of Ohio, and the fans there. So I think we have to keep that in mind. Second, look, what we like, obviously, and particularly as governor, I always tell local communities, you guys figure out what you want. Well, we have obviously the dispute that you've been covering, Daryl, and you know about it. And look, one can make arguments on both sides in regard to that. So, but ultimately, we hope that the community, kind of figures that out. I fully understand the concern about keeping the team, in Cleveland, physically in Cleveland. If they move, they'll be almost in Cleveland, but they won't be in Cleveland. So I get that. You get into arguments about if the stadium was not there on the lake, what could be there. So there's also that opportunity. There's also the opportunity, to think big. And I always like to think big, and certainly the Browns are thinking big. The other thing that's going on is, in this particular proposal, they're putting a significant amount of money, or at least they proposed to. If it went through, we don't know if it's going to go through, but if it occurred, that's a significant amount of money that would be going from the private sector into something that we hope would be economic development. The argument that has been made before I came up with my proposal has been based upon how much. When they talked about whether the state would put in 600 or whatever it would be, the argument is, well, the pro argument would be, we would see over a period of time taxes generated from that would equal that. And the argument is, well, you're creating more business, you're creating more things. But then you always get into the question, well, how much of that would have occurred anyway? Would it have occurred somewhere else? Is it displacing something else? The good thing about our proposal is you don't have to get into that. We don't have to even talk about that. Anything above that is the taxes that are gained by the local community, by the state. That would all be plus, because you already would have put the money in, from a source outside the general fund, outside the taxpayers. It would actually come from these out-of-state companies. So to me, that's again one of the arguments in favor of that. We don't have to get into this issue that we get into sometimes with the state putting money in, and is it going to be economic development? And if it is economic development, what does it do for revenues in the future? And they try to count this money, and no matter if people try to do it the best they can, no one can do it totally accurately. So it just eliminates that discussion. We don't have to get into that.
I could talk to you for hours upon hours about this, Governor. I'll leave you with this, probably the toughest question I'll ask you. Lieutenant Governor Tressel.
Yes.
Better lieutenant governor or football coach?
Now, well, he was both. He is now the lieutenant governor. So I call him Jim, but formally I call him the lieutenant governor. When he's, if he was online here today, I'd call him the lieutenant governor. And look, I picked him because he's a leader. This guy is an amazing leader. He could succeed at whatever he was doing. He went from lifetime of coaching football, always very, very successful. Then he went to Youngstown State. People say, well, what's that? He's going to be president. What's he know about that? He was a phenomenally successful president because he was a leader. He listened to people. And frankly, look, I wanted someone. What's the number one job of a vice president, number one job of a lieutenant governor? Is if something would happen to the governor or the president, that person needs to be able to walk in, take over, and be a leader. I had every confidence that he could do that. Second, I wanted someone who would really be value added every day as we deal with all the problems we have in Ohio. He really understands education. He really understands economic development, and how all that comes together with job creation, how it comes together with getting people prepared so that they can, in fact, live up to their full potential. and get the tools they need to be productive members of society. He thinks a lot about that. So he's just a phenomenal guy, and I've worked with him. Not really when he was coaching football, but I've worked with him since he became, the president of Youngstown State University, and just been so very, very impressed. And Fran and I went up to Medina and one Saturday morning and asked him if he would do it. And sure enough, after a little while, he said he would do it. And 13 days later, he was sworn in as lieutenant governor. So I'm very happy, and happy for the people of Ohio. We got such a great lieutenant governor.
That's great. I grew up with Coach Tressel when he was coaching the Penguins.
Yes.
And he was winning 1AA national titles. So no,
amazing.
Governor, thank you so much for your time. Again, I could talk to you for hours and hours, but I realize you have more important matters to be attending to than talking to me. But really appreciate your time today.
I've enjoyed it. We'll do it again sometime. Thank you.
Look forward to it. Governor Mike DeWine, thank you for his time as we continue to follow this stadium story here in Cleveland. Will they end up in Brook Park? Will they stay on the lakefront? The governor's not picking sides. I have, and I think everyone knows where I stand, but we will leave it at that. Thanks so much, Governor. It's always Game Day in Cleveland, brought to you by Smiley One in Bryant, Northeast Ohio's premier heating and cooling solution. Andy Baskin going to be back later this week. At least that's what I believe will happen. We'll try and get you ready for quarterback dumpster diving and free agency, which hits us next week. So for Andy Baskin, I'm Daryl Ryder, reminding you it's always Game Day in Cleveland.